According to the latest news from Fox News, on March 13th, in the Midwestern United States, an unprecedented hailstorm hit parts of Kansas and Missouri like a ruthless killer. The wind was strong, the rain was pouring, and at dusk in Yenjing, terrifying hailstones began to fall from the sky. This is not an ordinary hail, but a very rare super hail that exists in meteorological records. Hail as big as a baseball or even a softball. When you play tennis, hailstones, whether baseball-sized or softball-sized, can cause tremendous damage. If you were hit in the head by an ice cube like that, it could kill you. Senior meteorologist Sosnovsky said sincerely, his tone full of horror. On this terrifying night with dark clouds over the city, innocent people were forced to suffer from violent storms and super hail. Large pieces of hail violently hit houses, vehicles, and passers-by. The scene was in a mess, with glass flying everywhere and car body panels dented. The windshields of countless private cars were smashed through in this way, which was shocking to watch. I saw this hailstone bouncing in my backyard, and I had to run out and pick it up. A woman named Kathy Rocco witnessed the scene, her voice full of disbelief. What's even more frightening is that the area around Kansas City instantly fell into traffic epilepsy. As the road was covered with large hailstones, many sections of Interstate 70 were forced to close and passing vehicles stalled. The scene seemed like the end of the world that had been forgotten in a snowstorm. The wind was raging, rocks were flying, and everything was dilapidated as far as the eye could see. As if that wasn't cruel enough, multiple tornadoes hit Kansas and other areas, adding the final element of ferocity to this live-action blockbuster of nature. Among them, near Alta Vista, a huge super tornado roared and rolled over the grassland. Meteorological experts roared and called on nearby residents to evacuate immediately. Thank you for liking, leaving comments, subscribing and turning on the little bell. We will update every day. After the tornado, this once peaceful rural town was completely destroyed. The houses were scattered like pieces of paper, and all the telephone poles collapsed. The scene was shocking. Fortunately, there were no casualties in the town due to timely evacuation. Just at dusk, hail was raging, tornadoes were roaring, and the skies over Kansas City were changing colors and thousands of horses galloping. After nightfall, the disaster did not go away, but became worse. The National Weather Service has issued multiple tornado warnings, hail warnings, and thunderstorm warnings, and horrific natural disasters continue to wreak havoc. If you receive these warnings, get to a safe place and away from windows, one weatherman urged on social media. More residents in Kansas City and Missouri shared heart-wrenching videos and images online of their homes being battered by hail. Someone captured shocking footage of their home's windows and vehicle being completely pierced by huge hailstones. Until midnight, this live blockbuster of nature was still going on, resulting in dozens of reports of injuries being reported. Fortunately, despite the shocking power, no one was killed in this incident. At dawn the next day, the messy street scene looked like it had been ravaged by war, leaving the final footnote to this shocking theater in the world. People emerged from cellars or air raid shelters, and some burst into tears when faced with the reality that their homes had been destroyed. This super hail and tornado taught people a hard lesson and showed the most primitive and ferocious side of nature. We originally thought that we could conquer nature with the help of technology, but in the face of such crazy power, we have to humbly reflect on the principles of living in harmony with nature. Although the tropical storm has weakened, experts are still warning that this extreme weather will continue in the next few days. and the Midwestern United States may suffer more devastating disasters. Therefore, residents need to remain vigilant at all times, pay close attention to weather forecasts, and be prepared. It all ends like an illusory nightmare, and the sun shines on the human world again in the real world. But it may take a long time to reflect on and digest the many shocking lessons that nature has taught us. A tornado is a powerful and dangerous cyclone formed by rapidly rotating air currents that create an upright, hollow tube shape. Tornadoes vary in size, but are generally shaped like a funnel with a large top and a small bottom. The top of the funnel is connected with cumulonimbus clouds, and the lower part is usually in contact with the ground and is often surrounded by dust or debris. The formation principle of tornadoes is related to low air pressure and rotating wind direction. Tornadoes often occur in unstable air masses with high temperature and humidity. The air there is very disturbed, and the temperature difference between the upper and lower parts is quite different. When the temperature on the ground is about 30 degrees Celsius, the temperature has dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius at an altitude of 8,000 meters. This temperature difference causes the cold air to drop sharply, the hot air to rise rapidly, and the upper and lower air convection speeds are too fast, thus forming many small vortices. When these small vortices gradually expand, coupled with violent vibrations, they can easily form large vortices and become wind damage that attacks the ground or the ocean. Tornadoes are the product of thunderstorms in clouds. Specifically, a tornado is a form in which a small part of the huge energy of a thunderstorm is concentrated and released in a small area. The formation of tornadoes can generally be divided into 4 stages. First, atmospheric instability creates strong updrafts, which are further intensified due to the influence of maximum passing airflow in the jet stream. Then, due to the interaction with the wind that has both speed and direction in the vertical direction, that is, shear, the updraft begins to rotate in the middle of the troposphere, forming a mesoscale cyclone. Subsequently, the mesoscale cyclone itself thins and intensifies as it develops toward the surface and extends upward. At the same time, a small area of enhanced convergence, that is, a nascent tornado, is formed inside the cyclone, and the same process that produces the cyclone forms the core of the tornado. Most importantly, the rotation in a tornado's core is different from that in a cyclone, and is strong enough to allow the tornado to continue spreading to the surface. When the developed vortex reaches the surface height, the surface air pressure drops rapidly and the surface wind rises rapidly, forming a tornado. In some countries around the world, due to special geographical features, tornado events occur frequently. First of all, the United States is the country with the most tornadoes in the world, with an average of about 1,200 per year. The central and southeastern regions of the United States, especially Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, etc., are known as tornado corridors and are high incidence areas for tornadoes. Tornado season in the United States generally runs from March to June, but can occur in other months. Secondly, Canada is the country with the second most tornadoes in the world, with an average of about 62 per year. Tornadoes in Canada are mainly concentrated in Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. Canada's tornado season generally runs from May to September, but can occur in other months. In addition, the UK has the highest number of tornadoes in Europe, with an average of about 33 per year. Tornadoes in the UK are mainly found in southern England and Wales. Tornado season in the UK generally runs from June to August, but can occur in other months as well. It cannot be ignored that Australia is the country with the most tornadoes in the southern hemisphere, with an average of about 20 per year. Tornadoes in Australia are mainly concentrated in Western Australia and New South Wales. Australia's tornado season generally runs from September to December, but can occur in other months. It should be noted that Bangladesh is the country with the most tornadoes in Asia, with an average of about 6 per year. Tornadoes in Bangladesh are mainly distributed along the Bay of Bengal and the Ganges Delta. The tornado season in Bangladesh generally runs from March to May, but can occur in other months as well. Historically, there have been very serious tornado events that were shocking. On March 18, 1925, a disaster known as the Tri-State Tornado occurred in the American Midwest, which was the deadliest single tornado event on record. The tornado started in southeastern Missouri, passed through central Illinois, and finally reached southwestern Indiana, killing 695 people, injuring 2,027 people, and destroying more than 15,000 buildings. The path length of this tornado reached 352 kilometers, the maximum width reached 1.6 kilometers, and the maximum wind speed reached 500 kilometers per hour. It was rated as EF5. On April 3 to 4, 1974, a series of tornadoes known as the Super Outbreak occurred in the United States and Canada, the largest tornado outbreak on record. This outbreak produced a total of 148 tornadoes, 23 of which reached EF4 and 6 of which reached EF5, covering 13 states and Ontario. The outbreak killed 315 people, injured 5,484 people, and caused more than $3 billion in property damage. On April 26, 1989, a disaster known as the Dhaka tornado occurred in Bangladesh, one of the deadliest single tornado events on record. The tornado started from the outskirts of Dhaka and moved in the northeast direction, passing through Maniganj, Saville, Dhaka and other places, killing 1,300 people, injuring 12,000 people, and leaving 80,000 people homeless. The path length of this tornado reached 80 kilometers, the maximum width reached 1.5 kilometers, and the maximum wind speed reached 240 kilometers per hour. It was rated F3. On May 3, 1999, a disaster known as the Oklahoma City tornado occurred in Oklahoma, USA. This was one of the most powerful single tornado events on record. The tornado started in Chickasha, passed through Moore, Del City, Midwest City, Oklahoma City, and other places, and finally reached Stroud City, killing 36 people, injuring 583 people, and injuring 10 people. Billions of dollars in property damage. The path length of this tornado reached 122 kilometers, the maximum width reached 1.9 kilometers, and the maximum wind speed reached 512 kilometers per hour. It was rated as EF5. From April 25 to 28, 2011, a disaster known as the 2011 American tornado outbreak occurred in the southern United States. This was one of the largest tornado outbreaks on record. This outbreak produced a total of 358 tornadoes, 15 of which reached EF4 and 4 of which reached EF5, covering 21 states. The outbreak killed 324 people, injured 2,453 people, and caused more than $11 billion in property damage. When we encounter a tornado outdoors, reasonable escape methods are crucial. First, try to determine the direction and speed of the tornado, try to stay away from its path, and leave it from the side or back. If you feel that a tornado is nearby, you can hide in a strong bunker, such as a basement, semi-basement, steel concrete structure building, etc. Secondly, stay away from windows, doors, and surrounding walls. Get closer to the corner, cover yourself with some thick clothing, and protect your head to prevent being injured by flying debris. If possible, open doors and windows to balance the air pressure inside and outside to prevent the wind from blowing off the roof and blowing down the walls. Immediately afterwards, if there is no bunker in the wild, you should quickly find a low-lying place, such as a field ditch, a road ditch, etc. Lie down on the ground, close your mouth and eyes, and protect your head with your hands and arms. But be careful to stay away from big trees, telephone poles, billboards, fences, etc. to avoid being hit, crushed, or getting an electric shock. Finally, if you encounter a tornado while riding in a car, you should get out of the car immediately and seek shelter in a nearby low-lying area or shelter. Do not stay in the car. Because tornadoes can not only suck up and swallow cars and people, they can also create a large air pressure difference inside and outside the car, causing explosions. Through research and observation, it is not difficult to find that the frequency and intensity of tornadoes in the suburbs are higher than in the city. Why is this? First of all, the formation of tornadoes requires extremely unstable air disturbance, or the violent convergence of high temperature, high humidity air and cold air. Due to the influence of human activities, cities usually have higher temperatures, humidity, and pollutants. These factors will affect the stability and convection capabilities of the atmosphere, thereby inhibiting the generation of tornadoes. Secondly, the formation of tornadoes also requires strong vertical wind shear, that is, changes in wind speed and direction at different heights. The presence of buildings, roads, and traffic in cities will change the roughness and friction of the ground, thereby weakening the wind speed and wind shear near the ground, thereby inhibiting the development of tornadoes. In addition, the formation of tornadoes requires sufficient water vapor and latent heat, which is the heat released by water vapor during condensation and precipitation. Due to the influence of human activities, cities usually have lower vegetation coverage and soil moisture content. These factors will affect the evaporation and transport of water vapor, thereby reducing the energy source of tornadoes. In addition, in the face of frequent tornado attacks, we can actually take some methods and measures to prevent them. The first is to raise awareness of tornadoes and disaster prevention and mitigation. The public should understand the dangers of tornadoes, familiarize themselves with local tornado seasons, and formulate evacuation plans in advance. At the same time, it is also necessary to strengthen weather monitoring and early warning capabilities, use high technology to identify early signals of tornadoes, and take emergency measures such as evacuation or sheltering in place to reduce casualties as much as possible. Technology in this area has made great progress. For example, Doppler radar can detect incipient tornadoes more than 10 minutes in advance, which is of great significance to disaster prevention work. Second, the frequency and intensity of tornadoes need to be fundamentally reduced. The key is to suppress strong convective weather that could trigger tornadoes. This requires regulating the atmospheric environment to reduce the instability of the entire atmosphere. Important measures include responding to climate change, slowing down global warming trends, curbing urbanization, and protecting ecosystems. Urban areas can increase the coverage of green spaces and water bodies, reduce the urban heat island effect, and reduce the accumulation of heat sources. Ecosystems such as wetlands and forests inhibit the development of the troposphere through transpiration, which is also beneficial to mitigating tornadoes. In addition, substances such as silver iodide in the air can be artificially added to inhibit the development of strong convective clouds. These methods of controlling and intervening in the atmospheric environment can fundamentally reduce potential tornado disasters. More importantly, it is necessary to plan and build a wind-resistant and disaster-reducing human settlement environment. For example, optimize the urban layout and avoid high-rise buildings blocking ventilation. Improve building structural design standards, use materials that are windproof, impact-resistant, and resistant to rotational loads, and strengthen houses to withstand severe damage from tornadoes. At the same time, windproof passages and shelters are planned to quickly evacuate people to safe areas when a tornado strikes. Design a smart disaster prevention and mitigation system that can respond quickly to extreme weather. This will significantly reduce the loss of life and property in disasters. At present, in order to prevent tornado attacks, various countries have launched some defensive black technology equipment. First, blast the tornado by firing explosive missiles to disrupt the airflow. This is a method of using military means to intervene in a tornado. The purpose is to destroy the rotating structure of the tornado through the shock wave and heat generated by the explosion, thereby weakening or eliminating the destructive power of the tornado. However, there are many problems with this method, such as the trajectory of tornadoes is difficult to predict. Launching missiles may cause additional casualties, and the effect of explosions is difficult to guarantee. Secondly, there is the application of satellite microwave intervention. This is a method of using space technology to intervene in tornadoes. The purpose is to heat the storm by firing high-power microwaves at the tornado, cut off the energy that forms the tornado, and prevent the formation of funnel clouds. This is a theoretical solution proposed by an American physicist, but its feasibility and safety have not been verified, and the cost is huge, which may cause environmental and political controversy. At the same time, humans are developing methods to use artificial weather modification technology to intervene in tornadoes. The purpose is to promote the release of water vapor in the clouds by dropping substances containing condensation nuclei, such as dry ice or silver iodide, into the source of tornadoes, that is, strong convective clouds. Condensation releases atmospheric energy in advance, thereby weakening or preventing the formation of tornadoes. This method can reduce the probability of tornadoes to a certain extent, but it may also cause other adverse consequences, such as excessive rainfall leading to floods, or changing the path of tornadoes causing greater losses. What cannot be ignored is the establishment of shelters. This is a method of using construction technology to prevent tornadoes. The purpose is to build some sturdy, windproof, earthquake-proof, waterproof, fireproof, electricity-proof and other shelters in areas prone to tornadoes, such as basements and bunkers, air raid shelters, etc., to provide residents with safe refuge spaces. This method is currently the most practical and effective preventive measure, but it also requires a large investment of funds and manpower, and it is also necessary to improve the public's disaster prevention awareness and emergency response capabilities. The impact of human activities on the natural world is complex and far-reaching, the most significant of which is the environmental damage and climate change caused by human activities. With the continuous growth of population and the acceleration of industrialization, Human beings have increasingly exploited and utilized natural resources, emitting large amounts of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, leading to global warming, a sharp decline in biodiversity, and the destruction of natural ecosystems. It has brought about a series of environmental problems such as frequent extreme weather events. First, there is the overexploitation of natural resources. In order to meet the growing material needs of mankind, large-scale mining and use of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, etc., excessive deforestation and land reclamation, overfishing and indiscriminate hunting have led to the extinction of many species, a sharp decline in biodiversity, and an imbalance in the ecosystem. Secondly, it releases a large amount of pollutants. Human activities such as industrial production, transportation, and agricultural production will emit large amounts of pollutants into the atmosphere, water, and soil, such as greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, acidic gases such as nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides, and toxic pesticides and fertilizers. Harmful substances lead to global warming, acid rain, water eutrophication, and other environmental problems. At the same time, there is a change in land use. With the acceleration of urbanization, a large amount of natural land, such as farmland, wetlands, and forests, has been converted into construction land. The area of hardened land has expanded, and surface runoff has increased, exacerbating soil erosion and flood disasters. Unreasonable agricultural development can also cause problems such as land degradation and desertification. What cannot be ignored is the depletion of the ozone layer. Extensive use of chlorofluorocarbon-containing refrigerants, foaming agents, etc. has led to the destruction of stratospheric ozone, and the continued expansion of the ozone hole area has intensified ultraviolet radiation on the surface, threatening human health and ecological environment safety. Environmental damage caused by human activities has further caused chaos in the global climate system, manifested in significant global warming trends and frequent extreme weather events. The global average temperature continues to rise, with an increase of about 1 degree Celsius since the 20th century, and the trend is accelerating. Rising temperatures will cause ice and snow to melt and sea levels to rise, threatening island countries and coastal areas. At the same time, rising temperatures will cause abnormal atmospheric circulation, resulting in reduced precipitation in some areas and increased precipitation in other areas. The intensity and frequency of severe weather events such as extreme heat, droughts, and floods have also increased. Take a tornado, for example, which is a very destructive swirling storm. The formation of tornadoes is closely related to unstable atmospheric environment. When the surface is heated by solar radiation and the updraft is strong, if high-altitude cold air invades at this time, a strong intersection of cold and warm air will form, which can easily produce a tornado. Under the background of global warming, surface ocean temperatures have increased, evaporation has intensified, and the water vapor content in the atmosphere has increased, providing more energy for the occurrence of tornadoes. Research shows that the frequency and intensity of tornadoes in the United States and other places have increased in recent years, which is related to the increase in extreme weather events caused by global warming. In addition to tornadoes, the probability of other extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, floods, typhoons, etc. is also increasing under the background of global warming. These disastrous weather events have had a serious impact on human production and life, causing huge economic losses and casualties. To sum up, Environmental damage caused by human activities causes global climate change and frequent extreme weather events. By emitting greenhouse gases, destroying the ozone layer, polluting the environment, and changing the underlying surface. This has sounded the alarm for mankind to reflect on its development model and protect the ecological environment. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, developing clean energy, strengthening ecological protection and restoration, and adhering to the concept of sustainable development are the only ways to deal with environmental problems and safeguard humankind's own survival and development. Human beings are part of nature, and human survival and development are inseparable from the natural environment. To protect the environment is to protect human beings themselves. We must establish the concept of ecological civilization that respects nature, conforms to nature, and protects nature, accelerates the construction of a resource-saving, environment-friendly society, and embarks on a path of civilized development in which man and nature develop harmoniously. This requires the joint efforts of the government, enterprises, the public, and other parties. The government should strengthen environmental legislation and law enforcement, improve relevant laws, regulations and standards, increase investment in environmental protection, and promote green and low-carbon development. Enterprises must improve environmental awareness, accelerate green transformation and upgrading, promote cleaner production, reduce pollutant emissions, and improve resource utilization efficiency. The public should establish environmental awareness, change consumption concepts, develop a green, low-carbon, simple and moderate lifestyle, start from themselves, start from scratch, and contribute to building a beautiful home. Protecting the environment is a long-term and arduous task that requires the participation of the whole society, perseverance, and long-term success. Let us work together to build a beautiful home where man and nature coexist harmoniously. Let the concept of green development, that green waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets, be deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Let a good ecological environment become the growth point of people's happy life, and leave a blue sky to future generations. A beautiful home with green land and clean water. Human beings face a wide range of extreme weather natural disasters, the most serious of which are hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, heat waves, cold waves, hail, etc. These disastrous weather events are often sudden and destructive, bringing huge impact and losses to human production and life. A hurricane is a strong tropical cyclone that occurs in tropical or subtropical oceans. It has the characteristics of high wind speed, wide range, and strong destructive power. When a hurricane makes landfall, strong winds can destroy buildings, break trees, and overturn vehicles. Heavy rains can cause floods and landslides. Storm surges can inundate low-lying coastal areas, causing devastating blows to infrastructure and property. For example, Hurricane Katrina in 2005 devastated New Orleans and other places in the United States. Large areas were flooded, and infrastructure such as houses, roads, communications, and electricity were severely damaged. Post-disaster reconstruction was costly. Hurricane Dorian swept across the Bahamas in 2019. The violent storms destroyed a large number of houses, paralyzed infrastructure such as airports and ports, disrupted communications, interrupted power supply, and created a shortage of drinking water. The disaster areas faced a humanitarian crisis. Tornadoes are highly destructive air vortices that occur frequently in North America, Europe, Asia, and other places. Tornadoes are extremely destructive, reaching speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour, leaving no grass behind in their path. It can destroy buildings, uproot trees, overturn cars, and even roll heavy objects high into the air. Tornadoes can also trigger severe convective weather such as hailstorms and hailstones, which can cause devastating blows to crops, fruit trees, etc. In 2011, Alabama and Mississippi in the United States were hit by a once-in-a-century tornado. A large number of homes, schools, and shops were razed to the ground, trees were broken, telephone poles collapsed, power was interrupted, communications were interrupted, drinking water was contaminated, farmland was damaged, and the disaster area devastated everywhere. In 2013, Oklahoma in the United States was hit by an F5 tornado, which was the highest wind level and most destructive tornado. Wherever the tornado went, houses were completely destroyed, bricks and tiles were scattered everywhere, big trees were uprooted, telephone poles were broken, and the town was beyond recognition. Floods are one of the most common and most serious natural disasters. The causes of floods are complex and can be caused by typhoons and rains, melting ice and snow, tsunamis, etc., and are often accompanied by secondary disasters such as mudslides and landslides. Floods are fierce and can submerge farmland, destroy roads and bridges, destroy houses, and destroy water conservancy facilities, causing reduced agricultural production, paralyzing traffic, and leaving residents homeless. Post-disaster diseases can easily spread. In 2002, a once-in-a-century flood occurred in the Danube River basin in Europe. Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, and other countries were severely affected. Large areas of farmland were flooded, roads, railways, and bridges were destroyed. Many towns were besieged by floods for several days, with water and electricity cut off, and factories suspended production. The economic losses were heavy. In 2010, Pakistan suffered a devastating flood. The water level of the Indus River surged. Large areas of farmland were flooded. Roads, bridges, and transmission lines were destroyed. Houses collapsed. A large number of livestock were drowned. The victims were left homeless and lacked food and clothing. After the floods, infectious diseases such as malaria and cholera broke out. A large number of children were infected with skin diseases, and the health conditions in the disaster areas were worrying. Drought is a meteorological disaster caused by long-term low precipitation. It has the characteristics of wide impact, long duration, and heavy losses. Drought can lead to a series of problems such as crop failure, livestock starvation, frequent forest and grassland fires, drying up of reservoirs, and industrial water shortages and production shutdowns, seriously affecting food security, the ecological environment, and economic development. In 2011, East Africa suffered the worst drought in 60 years. The drought was severe in Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and other countries. Crops failed in large areas, pastures withered, millions of livestock died. More than 13 million people faced severe food shortages, and a large number of women and children suffered from malnutrition. Economic losses amounted to billions of dollars. In 2014, California in the United States suffered from a once-in-a-century drought, frequent forest fires, crop failure, reservoir bottoming out, urban water supply shortages, and economic losses of billions of dollars. In order to alleviate the drought, the local government had to take extraordinary measures such as restricting water use and raising water prices. Heat waves are extreme high-temperature weather events that can cause health problems such as heat stroke and dehydration, trigger forest fires, and bring losses such as agricultural harvest failure, livestock deaths, and power shortages. In 2003, Europe was hit by a rare high-temperature heat wave. France, Germany, Spain, and other countries were severely affected. A large number of crops dried up and died, vineyards failed to harvest, livestock died of heat stroke, forest fires occurred frequently, river water levels dropped, and nuclear power plants were forced to shut down due to lack of water for cooling. Economic losses amount to tens of billions of euros. In 2015, India was hit by a once-in-a-century heat wave, with the daily maximum temperature hitting record highs, reaching 48 degrees Celsius. The heat is unbearable, road asphalt has been burned by the sun, crops have withered in large areas, livestock have died of heat stroke, and power supply is tight. There has been a rush to buy refrigeration equipment in various places. Cold wave is an extreme weather event caused by strong cold air activity, often accompanied by blizzards, freezing, and other disastrous weather. When a cold wave strikes, temperatures plummet, heavy snow falls, roads freeze, traffic is paralyzed, crops and fruit trees freeze, water pipes burst, residents have difficulty heating, livestock freeze to death, and economic and social activities are severely affected. In 2008, Central Asian countries suffered from a once-in-a-century cold wave. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and other countries suffered from power supply shortages. Gas pipelines were frozen and damaged, heating was cut off, and residents suffered from freezing conditions. In order to prevent the livestock industry from suffering heavy losses, the local government organized herdsmen to move to avoid the cold. A tornado is an extremely destructive natural disaster. In addition to its strong wind force, which can directly destroy buildings, uproot trees, overturn cars, etc., it can also cause a variety of secondary disasters, further aggravating the disaster and expanding losses. Secondary disasters caused by tornadoes include many aspects. The first is hailstorms and hailstones. When a tornado passes through, it is often accompanied by strong convective weather, which easily produces hailstorms and hailstones. Heavy rain mixed with hail poured down, and the diameter of the hail can reach several centimeters or even more than 10 centimeters. Hail falls from the sky, damaging houses and buildings, destroying crops, and injuring livestock, causing serious impacts on transportation, electricity, and communications. For example, the tornado storm that hit the central and southern United States in April 2011 was accompanied by rare giant hailstones, with a diameter of more than 11 centimeters. It damaged the roofs and glass of a large number of homes and shops, destroyed large areas of corn, wheat, and other crops, and damaged many cars. It was smashed into a sieve, and the streets were full of branches and residual leaves smashed by the hail, and the streets were devastated. Followed by heavy rains and floods. After a tornado, heavy rainfall often occurs. Heavy rains come quickly and with heavy rainfall, which can easily cause floods. Flash floods broke out, rivers surged, low-lying areas were flooded, farmland was destroyed, roads and bridges were washed away, and water conservancy facilities were damaged, which had a serious impact on the production and life of people in the disaster areas. In May 2011, after a tornado struck the city of Joplin, Missouri, USA, heavy rainstorms occurred in the area, with rainfall exceeding 250 millimeters. Floods spread, houses were submerged, streets turned into rivers, school playgrounds were submerged, farmland turned into oceans. A large number of crops were drowned, drinking water sources were polluted, and victims were besieged by floods. The government dispatched helicopters to evacuate the victims. After the flood receded, the ground was filled with mud and a mess. At the same time, there are also mudslides and landslides. Heavy rainfall when a tornado passes through may also induce landslides and mudslides. The soil in mountainous areas is loose and vegetation is sparse, so heavy rains can easily cause landslides and mudslides. Mudslides mixed with boulders, gravel, and silt rush down like galloping horses, destroying houses, farmland, roads, and bridges along the way, blocking rivers and burying villages. They are extremely destructive. Landslides may bury roads and demolish civilian houses, causing traffic interruptions, communication interruptions, and power outages, making rescue and disaster relief extremely difficult. In April 2014, Arkansas and Mississippi were hit by tornadoes, followed by torrential rains. Severe landslides and mudslides occurred in many places. Highways were inundated and interrupted by mudslides. Mountains collapsed and crushed houses. Some villages were besieged by mudslides for several days, and houses were damaged. Seriously, the victims are facing a shortage of food and water. What cannot be ignored is forest fires. Tornadoes are often followed by lightning and thunderstorms, which can easily cause forest fires. Storms blow down trees, break branches, and litter the ground, and lightning strikes can easily trigger forest fires. Fueled by strong winds, the fires spread rapidly, burning forests, farmland, orchards, destroying houses, threatening the safety of villages and towns, and causing huge economic losses and ecological damage. In 2018, the Attica region of Greece was hit by a tornado, followed by severe forest fires. Fueled by strong winds, the fires quickly spread to residential buildings. Hundreds of houses were burned down, and thousands of people were forced to evacuate. The fires burned for several days before they were extinguished. Covering an area of tens of thousands of hectares, forest resources have been severely damaged and the ecological environment has been severely damaged. It is worth mentioning environmental pollution. Tornadoes may also cause damage to factory facilities and cause secondary environmental pollution accidents such as toxic chemical leaks and oil leaks. Toxic chemical leaks may pollute air, water, and soil, threaten residents' health, and damage the ecological environment. In August 2019, a tornado hit the Houston area of Texas, USA. A local chemical plant was destroyed and a large amount of toxic chemicals leaked. An explosion and fire broke out immediately. Thick smoke billowed and a pungent smell filled the air. The surrounding residents were evacuated. The environment has been severely polluted. After the accident, the Environmental Protection Department carried out emergency monitoring and disposal overnight to prevent further spread of chemical pollution. Public health events are even more damaging after tornado disasters occur. Sanitary conditions in disaster areas deteriorate and the risk of disease spread increases. Disaster victims lack food and drink, are malnourished, and have reduced resistance. They are easily infected once an epidemic breaks out. A large number of corpses rot in the disaster area, feces and garbage pollute the environment, flies and mosquitoes breed, and various infectious diseases are easily prevalent. After tornadoes struck Alabama and Mississippi in the United States in April 2011, health facilities in the disaster areas were severely damaged. The victims lived crowded in tents with poor sanitary conditions, and diseases such as diarrhea and skin diseases were prevalent. Rescue workers rushed to repair health facilities, provided clean drinking water and food to the victims, distributed disinfectants and medicines, and controlled the spread of the epidemic in a timely manner. Therefore, as a powerful natural force, The destructive power of tornadoes is not only reflected in direct impacts such as violent storms, but also in causing floods, mudslides, landslides, fires, pollution, and other secondary disasters. As a sudden extreme weather disaster, tornadoes will not only cause direct disaster impact and damage to countries and regions, but will also have a profound and lasting impact on their economic and social development. These impacts involve many fields such as economy, society, and environment, and often require long-term and arduous efforts in disaster areas to recover. First of all, tornado disasters will cause a heavy blow to the economic development of countries and regions. When disasters occur, strong winds and rains destroy houses and buildings, wash away roads and bridges, damage power and communications and other infrastructure, and destroy a large number of factories, workshops, farmland and pastures, shops and warehouses, causing direct economic losses of billions or even tens of billions of dollars. Post-disaster reconstruction requires huge capital investment, and it is difficult to restore production and living order in the disaster area in a short period of time. Many companies are facing suspension of production. A large amount of farmland is difficult to cultivate normally. Many shops are unable to open for business, and economic growth has seriously slowed down or even experienced negative growth. Take the 2011 tornado disaster in the middle and lower reaches of the Mississippi River in the United States. As an example, the direct economic losses in Tuscaloosa, Alabama alone exceeded $2 billion. The local economy suffered heavy losses, and a large number of manufacturing and service industries companies were forced to close their doors. GDP growth plummeted from 3% before the disaster to -2%, and the economy fell into recession. Post-disaster reconstruction took several years, and tens of billions of dollars were invested before the economy gradually returned to pre-disaster levels. It can be seen that tornado disasters have a great impact on local economic development, and recovery and reconstruction are difficult. Secondly, tornado disasters will also exacerbate social problems in the country and region. Disaster victims are displaced, homeless, their livelihoods are damaged, and their lives are in trouble. A large number of homes were destroyed, and the victims were forced to live in public places such as schools and gymnasiums, or to live in tents and shantytowns, and their quality of life dropped significantly. Many people have lost their livelihoods, face unemployment, and live in poverty. Public security in the disaster area has deteriorated, theft and robbery crimes have increased, and social order has been chaotic. The contradiction between local governments' fiscal revenue and expenditure has intensified. It not only needs to invest huge sums of money to rebuild homes, but also needs to resettle a large number of disaster-stricken people. The financial pressure is huge. Post-disaster reconstruction projects are progressing slowly, and victims are complaining. The credibility of the government has declined, social conflicts have intensified, and unstable factors have increased. Take the 2005 Hurricane Katrina that devastated New Orleans in the United States as an example. Post-disaster reconstruction has been delayed, and a large number of victims have been living in simple RVs or tents for a long time with low quality of life. Unemployment remains high, poverty worsens, and crime occurs frequently. Disaster victims are strongly dissatisfied with the government's ineffective assistance and slow reconstruction progress, and protests and demonstrations occur frequently. Social conflicts are increasingly intensifying, and the disaster-stricken areas have fallen into long-term turmoil. It was not until several years later with the strong support of the federal and state governments. That significant progress was made in the reconstruction of the disaster areas, and social order was gradually restored. However, some deep-seated conflicts have not yet been completely resolved. Thirdly, tornado disasters will also cause irreversible damage to the ecological environment of the country and region. The tornado destroyed everything, leaving no grass growing wherever it passed. Large swaths of forests have been uprooted, desertification has intensified, wetlands and swamps have been flooded and drained, and biodiversity has been destroyed, rare animal and plant resources have been devastated, and species have accelerated extinction, rivers and lakes have been silted up and polluted, and eutrophication of water bodies has worsened. Cultivated soil it has been severely eroded, and the salinization of farmland has worsened. These environmental problems are intertwined and harm not only the current generation but also future generations. Take the 2007 tornado in Greensburg, Kansas, USA, as an example. When the tornado passed through, strong winds and dust filled the sky. The billowing dust swallowed up large areas of farmland and pastures, turning what was once an oasis into a barren land. The heavy rainfall brought by the tornado caused flooding, nearby low-lying farmland was submerged, and the soil became wet, cold, and hardened. The tornado destroyed 95% of the local buildings, polluted the environment with a large amount of construction waste and domestic waste, and polluted many rivers and lakes. Post-disaster environmental restoration and management has become a long-term and arduous task, which requires the investment of a large amount of manpower and material resources to restore ecosystem functions and repair damaged land resources for decades. In addition, tornado disasters will also pose a long-term threat to national and regional public health and security. After the tornado, the health and epidemic prevention situation in the hard-hit disaster areas was very serious. Houses in disaster areas have collapsed, corpses have rotted, flies and mosquitoes have bred, bacteria and viruses have multiplied, and the risk of disease spread has increased dramatically. The affected people are crowded in tents and shanty towns, lack medical treatment and medicine, are malnourished, and have reduced resistance. Once the epidemic breaks out, the consequences will be disastrous. Drinking water sources are polluted, floods occur, feces and garbage are scattered, and intestinal infectious diseases such as cholera and typhoid are easily prevalent. A large number of corpses are rotting, mosquitoes and flies are breeding, and vector-borne infectious diseases such as plague and dengue fever are difficult to prevent. The injured are more likely to be infected with tetanus, hepatitis A, and other wound infections. The disaster-stricken areas lack medical resources, medical facilities have been destroyed, vaccines and medicines are in short supply, disease control and epidemic prevention capabilities have declined, and the degree of disaster relief has increased. If the epidemic spreads out of control, the disaster area will be paralyzed. In 2011, Joplin, Missouri, USA, suffered a rare tornado disaster. Thousands of people were injured overnight and tens of thousands were left homeless. Houses in the disaster area have collapsed, sewers have been damaged, drinking water has been polluted, garbage is everywhere, mosquitoes and flies breed, and the hidden dangers of infectious diseases are prominent. In order to prevent the epidemic from getting out of control, the health and epidemic prevention departments cleaned up garbage overnight, sprayed disinfectants, distributed disinfectant drugs, organized mass vaccinations, and went all out to carry out health and epidemic prevention, which ultimately prevented a major outbreak. However, Post-disaster reconstruction still requires a high degree of vigilance against the recurrence of various epidemic diseases. Finally, tornado disasters will also have a profound impact on the morale and cultural identity of the country and region. Faced with the sudden changes in the situation and the broken mountains and rivers of their homes, people often feel unprecedented panic and loss of confidence. Frequent exposure to extreme weather disasters such as tornadoes will shake people's sense of identity and belonging to their hometown. Many people have to move their families and leave their hometowns to avoid disasters. Losing their familiar living environment and being far away from their relatives and friends, many people feel a strong sense of confusion and wandering. At the same time, after experiencing great suffering, some people began to question life and society, and their values were shaken. After the tornado, many landmark buildings were destroyed, ancient neighborhoods disappeared, many historical relics were destroyed, cultural heritage was in danger of being lost, and local traditional culture suffered heavy losses. Take the 2013 tornado disaster that struck Moore, Oklahoma, USA, as an example. A magnitude 9 tornado flattened the town. A local century-old school was flattened and razed to the ground. A large number of precious historical photos and manuscripts in the collection were destroyed. The school's long tradition of running schools and spiritual culture suffered a devastating blow. The tornado also destroyed the town's ancient city hall, church, opera house, and other landmark buildings. The town lost its cultural landmarks and spiritual symbols. During post-disaster reconstruction, many residents bid farewell to their homes where they had lived for generations with heavy hearts, leaving their hometowns and moving elsewhere. The town has lost many old residents, many neighborhood relationships that have lasted for generations have been broken, and the rich local culture has been fragmented. With the influx of immigrants in large numbers, the appearance of the town has changed and the traditional culture has gradually declined. After this catastrophe, the psychological trauma of the people is difficult to heal, their values have been shaken, and their cultural identity has been in crisis. Therefore, extreme disastrous weather events such as tornadoes will not only bring direct casualties and property losses to countries and regions, but will also have a profound and lasting impact on economic development, social stability, ecological environment, public health, and public morale. It requires long-term and unremitting efforts in the disaster area to recover. This requires us to take early precautions, strengthen the construction of disaster prevention infrastructure, improve disaster prevention and emergency plans, and improve the disaster prevention, reduction, and relief capabilities of the whole society. At the same time, after the disaster, we must scientifically coordinate, organize carefully, mobilize all parties, increase financial investment and policy support, implement classified policies, make key breakthroughs, and orderly promote post-disaster reconstruction to minimize disaster losses and minimize the impact of disasters. Only by forming joint efforts in various aspects such as disaster prevention, disaster resistance, disaster relief, and disaster management can we finally defeat the disaster and achieve the comprehensive revitalization and development of the disaster area. Tornadoes are extremely destructive natural disasters that occur all over the world, but the probability and intensity vary in different regions. Generally speaking, tornadoes mostly occur in North America, the South Asian subcontinent, Australia, and other places, among which the tornado corridor in the central United States is the most famous. The United States is the country with the most frequent tornadoes in the world, with an average of more than 1,000 tornadoes every year, 3/4 of which occur in the tornado corridor area. The Great Plains area in the central United States is called the Tornado Alley or Tornado Alley, including Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and other states. It is recognized as a tornado-prone area in the world. The terrain of this area is flat, and strong convective weather prevails at the turn of spring and summer. Cold and warm air meet here, making the air unstable and easily forming tornadoes. The U.S. Tornado Alley area accounts for about 15% of the U.S. land area, but 75% of the country's tornadoes occur, making it the hometown of tornadoes. The Atlantic coast and Gulf Coast of the southern United States, including Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and other states, are also prone to tornadoes. This area is close to the warm ocean, with abundant water vapor and hot and humid air. When it meets the cold air from the north and south, it often forms severe thunderstorms accompanied by tornadoes. In addition, the eastern and southeastern United States, such as Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and other places, are also high incidence areas for tornadoes, with hundreds of tornadoes forming here every year. In addition to the United States, some other regions in the world are also prone to tornadoes. In North America, dozens of tornadoes occur every year in Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, and other places in Canada. Mexico is also one of the countries prone to tornadoes, especially the eastern coastal areas near the Gulf of Mexico, such as Tamaulipas, Veracruz, and other places, which are hit by tornadoes almost every year. In the South Asian subcontinent, Bangladesh is the hardest hit area by cyclones. Bangladesh is bordered by the northern Indian Ocean. Tropical cyclones land from the sea every year, bringing strong storm surges and heavy rains. When these tropical cyclones interact with Bangladesh's unique terrain conditions, they can easily form tornadoes. Tornadoes in Bangladesh mostly occur from April to May and October to November every year. On average, about 30 to 60 tornadoes are formed here every year, some of which have wind speeds of more than 80 meters/second and are extremely destructive. The eastern coastal areas of India, such as Orissa and Andhra Pradesh, are also hot spots for tornadoes in South Asia. These areas are close to the Indian Ocean. Tropical cyclones land from the sea every year, bringing strong winds and rains, and tornadoes often occur on the edges of cyclones. In addition, in the Deccan Plateau, Ganges Plain, and other places in central India, the tropical cyclone season from May to June every year is also a period of frequent tornadoes, with an average of about 20 to 30 tornadoes forming here every year. In Australia, tornadoes mainly occur in the northern and eastern coastal areas of the country. Northern Australia is bordered by the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean and belongs to the tropical monsoon climate zone. The rainy season is from November to April of the following year and is also the active period of tropical cyclones. When these tropical cyclones make landfall from the sea, they often produce tornadoes in their spiral rain bands. Queensland, the Northern Territory, and other places are high incidence areas for tornadoes in Australia. On average, about 30 to 50 tornadoes are formed here every year, and the wind speed can reach more than 70 meters/second. In the coastal areas of southeastern Australia, such as New South Wales and Victoria, the turn of spring and summer is also an active period for tornadoes. These areas are affected by low pressure on the east coast and often experience severe convective weather, accompanied by tornadoes. Although the number and intensity of tornadoes here are not as high as those in the north, they do occur from time to time, with an average of about 10 to 20 tornadoes forming here every year. In Europe, the incidence of tornadoes is significantly lower than in North America, but it has been increasing in recent years. Tornadoes in Europe mostly occur in countries around the Mediterranean, such as Italy, Spain, Greece, and other places. These countries are close to the Mediterranean Sea, and strong convective weather often occurs in summer and autumn, accompanied by tornadoes. Italy is the country with the most tornadoes in Europe, with an average of about 20 to 30 tornadoes every year, mainly concentrated in the central and southern regions of the country. The southeastern regions of Spain, such as Murcia and Valencia, are also high incidence areas for tornadoes in Europe. It is close to the Mediterranean Sea, and strong convective thunderstorms often occur in summer and autumn, which can easily form tornadoes. On average, about 10 to 20 tornadoes form here every year, mostly from September to November. Countries on the east coast of the Mediterranean, such as Greece, Turkey, and Israel, also have tornadoes from time to time, but the incidence rate and intensity are not as high as those on the west coast of the Mediterranean. In addition to countries around the Mediterranean, tornadoes occasionally occur in some inland countries in Europe. The UK is the European country with the most tornadoes, apart from the Mediterranean countries. The UK has a temperate maritime climate, with humid air and frequent thunderstorms in summer, which is conducive to the formation of tornadoes. British tornadoes mostly occur in central and southern England, such as around London, Birmingham, and other cities, but their intensity is generally weak, generally at the F0, F2 level. In Central European countries such as Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic, tornadoes occasionally occur, but the probability of occurrence is low and the intensity is also weak. In South America, the probability of tornadoes is generally low, but in specific areas of some countries, the probability of tornadoes is significantly higher than in other areas. The Pampas in northeastern Argentina is a high incidence area for tornadoes in South America, especially in the country's capital Buenos Aires and its surrounding areas, where several tornadoes occur every year. The terrain here is flat, the climate is hot, and there are frequent thunderstorms in summer, making it easy for tornadoes to form. Tornadoes in Argentina mostly occur from December to March of the following year. On average, about 5 to 10 tornadoes are formed here every year, and the intensity is generally at the F0, F2 level. The southeastern coastal areas of Brazil, such as around cities such as Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, are also hot spots for tornadoes in South America. It is close to the Atlantic Ocean, has a humid and hot climate, and has strong convective weather in summer, which is conducive to the formation of tornadoes. Tornadoes in Brazil mostly occur from December to February of the following year. On average, about 3 to 5 tornadoes are formed here every year, but the intensity is generally weak, mostly at the F0, F1 level. In Africa, the probability of tornadoes is very low, but in some specific areas, such as the eastern coast of South Africa, the probability of tornadoes is significantly higher than in other African areas. Eastern South Africa borders the Indian Ocean. Affected by the Indian Ocean high pressure and the Antarctic vortex, there are many strong convective weather in summer and autumn, accompanied by tornadoes. Tornadoes in South Africa mostly occur in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. On average, about 1 to 3 tornadoes are formed here every year, and the intensity is generally at the F0, F2 level. In Asia, except for some countries in the South Asian subcontinent mentioned above. The probability of tornadoes in other regions is generally low. Japan is the country with the most tornadoes in Asia besides South Asian countries. Japan has a temperate monsoon climate with high temperatures and rainy summers. Typhoons often landfall, accompanied by tornadoes. Tornadoes in Japan mostly occur in the southern areas of Kyushu Island, Shikoku Island, and Honshu Island. July to October is the peak period for tornadoes. On average, about 5 to 10 tornadoes are formed in Japan every year, but the intensity is generally weak, mostly at F0, F1 level.